I stood in front of the towering glass doors of the Talcott Group building, the place where it all started. The place I thought I could call home, where my name was once etched into blueprints on the cutting edge of innovation. But now, all I felt was the cold embrace of rejection. It had been 5 years since I walked away from aerospace engineering, the industry that once defined me. I had moved on to something different: academia, teaching. It wasn't the grand future my father had envisioned, but it was a choice I made for myself. Still, there was this nagging pull every time I passed the corporate buildings, the awards, the endless accolades that somehow felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. And tonight, I was here, at my father's prestigious Tech Awards gala. My name is Jenna Talcott. I'm 36 years old, and I'm standing in the shadow of the man who built this empire. My father, Gordon Talcott, an icon in the aerospace industry. And as always, I was on the outside looking in. I wasn't supposed to be here, not really. I had been invited out of obligation, I figured. A hollow gesture. My father didn't even know what to do with me anymore. I had long since been sidelined, dismissed like a forgotten project left on the back burner, out of sight, out of mind. Still, he couldn't escape the idea of me showing up to make a public appearance, for old time's sake. I walked into the ballroom, all polished wood and gleaming silver, an ocean of smiling faces and champagne flutes. It should have felt like a homecoming, but instead, I felt small, invisible even. No seat had been saved for me at the front, no mention of my name in the program, nothing. Just the cold, sterile reception of the elite, whose eyes flicked over me for a moment before moving on to more important matters. I spotted my younger brother Nolan standing by the stage. His suit was sharp, his hair combed just right. Everything he did screamed success. And there he was, standing next to our father, the pride and joy of the Talcott legacy, smiling at the cameras, soaking in the accolades. I could almost hear the applause in my head. "Jenna, you made it!" Nolan's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. He approached me with that smug grin of his, the one that said, "I'm better than you, and I know it." He handed me a glass of champagne, his eyes glinting with something between pity and amusement. "Isn't this great? Dad's finally getting the recognition he deserves." He gestured toward the stage where my father was preparing to speak. "I'm glad for him," I said, taking the glass from him but not really drinking it. The effervescence felt hollow. "He's worked hard for it." "Hard, huh?" Nolan smirked, leaning in closer. "Maybe hard for you, but for me, it's been a walk in the park." He gave a casual nod toward the stage where my father was now speaking to the crowd, the spotlight gleaming in his eyes. "I guess it's easier when you don't quit halfway through, huh?" My heart sank. The words stung, but they weren't new. He'd been throwing jabs like this for years. Every move he made was carefully calculated to undermine me, to remind me that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong in their world. I didn't bother responding to his passive-aggressive comment. Instead, I looked toward my father. His voice boomed across the room, recounting the company's incredible achievements, the advancements in drone technology, the contracts, the milestones, all with Nolan by his side, nodding and smiling like he had anything to do with it. "And of course," my father continued, "the true innovators of this company who continue to push us forward into the future, my son, Nolan Talcott, whose legacy will no doubt extend for generations to come." The applause that followed was deafening. I stood there feeling like I was suffocating in a room full of strangers. Nolan, who had barely earned a seat at the table compared to the work I had done, was now the crown jewel of the Talcott dynasty. And me? I was nothing more than a shadow. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thin. I swallowed hard, standing on the edge of a place that had once felt like home but now seemed so far away. "You okay?" Nolan's voice cut through the noise. He tilted his head, eyeing me like a snake sensing weakness. "Dad's right, you know. You really should have stayed with the company. All those failures in your past, well, they've certainly become a story of their own, haven't they?" I could feel my face flush with heat. My last interaction with my father, that final painful conversation, rushed back to me. His words, cold, dismissive, and cutting, still echoed in my ears. "You're a footnote in a user manual, Jenna." The sting of that memory was fresh even after all these years. And here I was, standing in a room full of people, watching Nolan take the spotlight I should have had. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could be civil, but the bitterness rose up, sharp and relentless. "I'm sure you're right, Nolan," I said, my voice tight. the words slipping out before I could stop them. I probably did fail. But at least I had the courage to leave. You're still stuck playing daddy's little pawn. I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes, quickly masked by a cold smile. He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, my father's booming voice interrupted. Jenna, over here! Come join us! I'd like to have a word with you. The coldness in my father's tone froze me in place. He barely looked at me as I walked toward him, his eyes shifting back to the crowd. No recognition, no warmth, just an unspoken command to take my place among the forgotten. This night was never about me. It was about what I wasn't, what I could never be in their eyes. I swallowed my pride, pasted on a smile, and joined the sidelines. And just like that, I was nothing more than a footnote in my own story. The air in the incubator building smelled sterile, like a blend of fresh paint and coffee. I had visited this place before, years ago, back when it was just an idea. The vision was simple: a hub for innovation, a breeding ground for new ideas, a place where young engineers, like I once was, could incubate their dreams and create the future of technology. But now it was all too polished, too curated. I walked through the sleek lobby, past the glass walls that looked like they belonged in a high-end art gallery rather than a tech space. It had been a decade since I funded this place. A decade since I had anonymously donated my savings to kickstart the incubator that bore my family's name, my legacy. Back then, I was proud, excited even. I had poured everything into this place, knowing it would be a stepping stone for the next generation of engineers. Little did I know, it would soon become a monument to my erasure. I approached the reception desk and checked in. The receptionist, young and enthusiastic, smiled brightly, handing me a visitor's badge before pointing me toward the exhibition area in the back. I nodded politely, walking down the long hallway, my heart pounding with a quiet mix of dread and curiosity. When I reached the showroom, I stopped in my tracks. There, on display, was the prototype of my original drone design. It was sleek, well-lit, and framed by modern graphics and glossy brochures touting its future applications. But it wasn't credited to me. There, on the display, was Nolan's name. Bold, front and center. Nolan Talcott, lead engineer. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I scanned the exhibit, expecting, perhaps hoping, that there was some mention of my contributions. After all, it was my design, my blueprint, my work. But there was nothing. Not even a hint of my name. My hands shook as I stood there, staring at the glass case that contained the product of my blood, sweat, and years of hard work, now attributed entirely to Nolan. I wasn't even a footnote. A young employee approached me, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. He was eager, bright-eyed, the kind of person I used to be when I believed in the work, in the future of innovation. "This is our latest model," he said, his voice full of pride. "Nolan's design is truly revolutionary. He's been instrumental in taking this concept to the next level." I fought to keep my voice steady, to mask the bitterness that threatened to spill over. "It's impressive," I said, forcing a smile. I didn't realize Nolan had been so involved with the design. I thought, "Oh, it's all Nolan." He cut me off, not unkindly, but with absolute certainty. His team really did some groundbreaking work. "All the credit goes to him." I nodded, barely hearing him anymore. Groundbreaking work. I clenched my fists at my sides, the memories of the long nights, the constant testing, the sacrifices I made, all flooding back. I managed to step away, moving toward a nearby digital screen displaying more details about the incubator's history. As I scrolled through, I expected to find something, anything that might give me a trace of acknowledgement. But all I saw were the words Talcott Group at the top of the page. Nothing about the actual people behind the work, certainly nothing about me. My fingers hovered over the screen, and without thinking, I tapped through to the patent archive, hoping there might be something buried in the digital files. Maybe the truth had been hidden here. Maybe I could at least find some proof that I hadn't been completely erased. The screen flickered for a moment before the archive loaded. I scanned through the listings, searching for my name for a reference to the patents I had filed. My breath caught in my throat when I saw it. All the patents were listed under Talcott Group. No mention of individual engineers. No mention of me. Nolan's name didn't appear anywhere in the documents either. But there, buried in the metadata, was a note that made my stomach drop. All rights belong to Talcott Group, Inc. My heart hammered in my chest as I skimmed through the pages, the sickening realization dawning on me. My father had been behind all of this. Of course he had. It was his company, his empire, and Nolan, his golden child, was the perfect successor. They had erased me. They had taken everything I had built, everything I had worked for, and rewritten it as if I had never existed. I felt dizzy. I couldn't stay here any longer, not with the sting of betrayal still sharp in my chest. I had come here to find something that would validate me, something that might make me feel like my contributions had meant something. But now, all I had were ghosts. I pulled myself together, forcing my feet to move toward the exit. As I passed by the reception desk again, the receptionist smiled at me, the same eager smile she had given me when I first arrived. "Thank you for visiting. We hope you'll consider returning to support our work," she said cheerfully. I nodded, swallowing hard, and stepped out into the cool evening air, the door closing softly behind me. I should have been proud of what I had built, but instead, all I could feel was the weight of being forgotten, completely and utterly erased from the future I had helped create. The diner was a small, quiet place on the edge of town, the kind of place you went when you wanted to avoid being seen. Leah was already sitting at a booth in the back when I arrived, her eyes scanning the menu, but I could tell she wasn't really looking at it. She hadn't been for years. Leah and I used to work together. She had been one of the few people who understood the weight of the work we did, the sacrifices we made for the Talcott Group. We had both been part of the original team, the team that had designed, tested, and perfected what had been the cornerstone of my career. And when I left, she had stayed. She had stayed and watched as everything was rewritten, as the past was erased, and Nolan's face was put on everything I had created. Leah's look when I slid into the booth was one of quiet acknowledgement, but she didn't smile. Neither of us was in the mood for pleasantries anymore. "I brought it," she said, sliding a small USB drive across the table toward me. "You might want to sit down for this." I took the drive and stuffed it in my coat pocket. "You said you had proof. What kind of proof?" Leah looked around, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You remember that memo you sent when you left? The one where you said you were resigning and moving on to academia?" I nodded, the memory of that resignation letter still fresh in my mind. I had thought it would be a clean break. I had hoped it would be, but as soon as I left, I realized how easily they could rewrite my history, burying everything I had done. And now with Leah here, I realized the truth. It had never been about me. It was about keeping the Talcott Group intact, keeping Nolan's rise smooth. "That memo," she said, her voice shaky. "It's been altered. The public version. The one they put in the company records." "It wasn't what you wrote." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean altered?" Leah's face was grim as she leaned in closer. "The real memo you wrote, the one you sent to HR. It was professional. You said you were leaving to focus on teaching, that you appreciated the opportunity, all that. But the version that went public, it says you were incompetent. It says you sabotaged projects, and it says you had a personal breakdown." My heart skipped a beat. "What? That's ridiculous. Who the hell would have altered that?" Leah looked away, her eyes darting around the diner nervously. "Your father. He did it through HR. It was all part of the plan to erase you, Jenna. I don't know how much you remember, but they've been cleaning up their tracks for years. You weren't just written out of the company. You were written out of the story." I felt a chill spread through me as the weight of her words sank in. I had always known my father was cold, calculated, but I never thought he would go this far. To twist the truth like that, to make me the villain in my own departure. It made my stomach churn. "So what now?" I asked, feeling the anger rise inside me. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not anymore. Leah slid a folder across the table toward me. "I also got some internal memos, and there's more. There's someone else you need to know about." "Max," I said, suddenly feeling a tight knot in my chest. I hadn't heard that name in years. Max was the engineer who had blown the whistle on faulty testing protocols. I'd never fully understood why he had been let go so quietly, but I had always suspected foul play. Leah nodded, her voice dropping even lower. "Max was the one who tried to stop the rollout of those drones. You remember the ones you worked on? There was an issue with the testing phase, but he went public with it. They didn't just silence him, they made sure his death looked like an accident." I stared at Leah, my mind reeling. "You're saying Max? He was murdered?" "I'm not saying it outright," Leah said, her eyes avoiding mine. "But the way they handled everything after his accident, the cover-up, it wasn't right, Jenna. It was a warning." A warning. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had always thought Max's death was suspicious, but hearing Leah say it out loud hit me like a punch in the gut. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked, my voice tight. Why didn't anyone tell me? Leah sighed and leaned back in the booth, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them on the table. I was scared. I didn't know who to trust. But after everything that happened with you, after the way they've treated you, I had to come forward. I couldn't just let it go anymore. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. What do we do with this? How do we expose them? Leah's expression darkened. I've been working on that. I've got a folder with all the details. But here's the thing, Jenna. It's not just about you. It's about what your father did to Max. And Nolan, he's been part of it all. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? Leah's eyes met mine, her voice barely above a whisper. Nolan knew about the faulty testing. He knew Max was going to blow the whistle, and he didn't do anything. He didn't stop it. He let it happen. If you expose your father's corruption, Nolan's going down with him. The words hit me like a freight train. I had always known Nolan was ambitious, but this was more than just sibling rivalry. This was something far more dangerous. Nolan had been complicit in covering up a death. He had helped bury the truth, all for the sake of his own success. My hands trembled as I picked up the folder Leah had given me. It was thick, filled with evidence, memos, and detailed records that proved everything I had suspected. Max's final warnings, my father's manipulation, Nolan's silence. I had all the pieces now. All I had to do was put them together. I need time, I said, my voice steady despite the storm swirling inside me. I need to think about how to use this. But this changes everything. Leah nodded, her expression hardening. Just be careful, Jenna. They've covered their tracks well, but the truth is on your side. Just don't make the mistake I did. Don't wait too long. I stood up, the weight of the folder in my hand feeling like a heavy, suffocating burden. The truth was out there. But the question was, how far was I willing to go to expose it? I walked out of the diner, my mind racing, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the fire burning inside me. This was it, the beginning of the end, and I wouldn't stop until I got the truth. The sound of the door creaking open echoed through the darkened hallway of my mother's former studio. I hesitated for a moment, just standing there in the threshold, staring into the dim room. The place felt suffocating now, cold, empty. I hadn't been back here in years, hadn't wanted to, not after everything. But something about tonight, about what Leah had just shown me, felt like I was being pulled back to a place I could no longer ignore. I needed answers, and the studio was where my mother had kept everything. All the secrets, all the things I never asked about when she was still alive. The room smelled like dust and memories, faded paintings hanging on the walls, a clutter of old books scattered on the floor, the faint aroma of paint and brushes lingering in the air. It had been my mother's sanctuary, the place where she found solace, away from everything that had fallen apart in her life, the place where she had always been free to create, to think, to be herself. I moved deeper into the room, letting my eyes wander over the shelves, the art that never quite made it into galleries, the unfinished projects that now seemed like remnants of a life that had been left behind. I ran my fingers across the dusty surface of an old bookshelf, stopping when I saw something out of place. A picture frame, crooked, as if someone had left it in a hurry. I took it in my hand, examining it carefully, my fingers brushing over the faded photograph. It was a picture of my parents years ago, happy and full of hope. But what caught my attention wasn't just the image. It was what lay behind it, a folded piece of paper wedged into the frame. I pulled it out with shaking hands, unfolding it slowly. It was a letter. I recognized her handwriting immediately, even after all these years. She had written this just before she died. My heart skipped a beat as I read the words. Jenna, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. But I need you to know that I've left everything to you, my intellectual properties, my share in the Talcott Group, and everything that should have been yours all along. Don't trust the board. They will lie, they will deceive, but you deserve the truth. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a letter, it was a will. Her will. My heart raced as I read on. I don't know how much time I have left, but I want you to take everything, take control. You're stronger than you know, and please don't let them win. Protect what's yours. Trust your instincts. I stared at the letter, my hands trembling. The weight of it settled in my chest like a stone. My mother had left me everything, the legacy, the intellectual property that I thought was gone. It had all been hidden here, in this studio, away from the prying eyes of the Talcott Group, away from my father and Nolan. And then I saw it. Tucked behind the letter, hidden under a stack of old sketches, was a second piece of paper, an unsigned will, a legal document. My eyes widened as I read the words, my pulse quickening with every line. I, Jane Talcott, hereby declare that my entire estate, including all intellectual properties, shares in the Talcott Group, and assets, are to be passed solely to my daughter, Jenna Talcott. This decision is final and irrevocable. It is my wish that she take ownership of the legacy that should have always been hers. My hands went cold as I absorbed the gravity of it. My mother had named me sole inheritor of everything, the entire Talcott legacy. Not Nolan, not my father, me, but why had it been hidden away like this? Why hadn't I known? The letter was unsigned, but the will was clear. This was what she had intended, what she had left for me. And yet, the world, my family, had written me out of it entirely. Just then, I heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. I froze, panic surging through my chest. I knew who it was. There was only one person who could have known I was here. I quickly shoved the papers back into the picture frame, trying to act casual, trying to mask the burning realization that was threatening to swallow me whole. But it was too late. The door opened slowly, and there she was, Maria, our housekeeper. She stood in the doorway, her eyes flicking nervously between me and the room, her face pale. "Jenna," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "You shouldn't be here." I felt a knot form in my throat. "Maria, I started, but she cut me off, stepping into the room. "I was supposed to destroy it. I was told to destroy everything," she whispered, her hands wringing in front of her. "But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to do it." My breath caught in my chest. "What are you talking about? Destroy what?" She didn't meet my eyes, instead looking at the floor, her voice barely audible. "Your mother, she knew what was happening with the company. She knew about your father, about Nolan. She knew they were taking everything from you." My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. "You knew about this? All along?" Maria nodded, her eyes welling up. "I didn't know everything, but she confided in me. She told me to keep it safe, told me to make sure you knew the truth one day, when the time was right." I felt a coldness spread over me, the weight of the moment settling over me like a thick fog. Maria had known. She had known all along. And she had kept the secret, not just for me, but for my mother, too. As I processed everything, a wave of anger and betrayal rose inside me. My father, Nolan, they had been playing a long game, and I had been nothing but a pawn. But now, with this letter, this will, everything was different. The truth was mine to claim. And I was done hiding in the shadows. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart skipped in my chest. I knew who it was. It was my father. I could feel his presence, his dominance, even from here. "Jenna," Maria whispered, stepping back. "You need to go. He's coming." I didn't need to be told twice. I shoved the picture frame into my coat pocket, feeling its weight, its significance. I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to be silent, not now, not after everything I'd learned. I turned to Maria, my voice low but firm. "Thank you for everything, Maria. I won't let them take this from me." She nodded, tears slipping down her face. "Be careful, Jenna. They'll come for you. They'll try to stop you." I didn't have time to reply. I grabbed the door handle, my heart pounding. The storm was coming, but this time, I was ready. As I slipped out the back door and into the night, I knew one thing for certain. The Talcott legacy was mine, and I was going to take it back. The motel was small, tucked away off the main highway like a forgotten relic of some bygone era. The neon sign flickered as I stepped out of my car, the cold night air biting at my skin. I had parked in the corner of the lot, far from the other vehicles, as if I was already preparing to disappear. My mind was still reeling from everything I'd learned, the letter, the will, my mother's final warning, and Maria's revelation. It was all too much, and yet in some twisted way, it all made sense. But it was one thing to have the truth in your hands and another to know what to do with it. What good was knowing the truth if there was no one to back you up? That's when I remembered Marcus Tier. I hadn't expected him to show up, but he had. And when he did, he brought more than just an offer of help. He brought leverage. The room inside the motel was dim, the air heavy with the smell of stale cigarette smoke. I walked through the door, scanning the small, run-down space until I saw him sitting at the far end of the room, near the window, his back turned to me. "Marcus," I said quietly, closing the door behind me. "I thought you weren't coming." He turned slowly, his face partially obscured by the low light. but I recognized him immediately. His dark hair, sharp jawline, and the quiet intensity in his eyes. He was no stranger to the pressure I was under, and despite everything, I was starting to feel a strange kind of relief. For once, I wasn't alone in this fight. Had to lay low, he said, his voice gravelly. Your father's people are everywhere, but I told you I'd be here, and I keep my promises. I took a seat across from him, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a stone. So, what's this about witness protection? Is that really my only option? Marcus leaned forward, pulling a folder from his bag. The papers inside were thick, full of government jargon and official stamps. Witness protection isn't the only option, he said, opening the folder and sliding it toward me. But it's the safest. If you testify, you'll be a target. Your father's not going to let this slide. Nolan? He'll do whatever it takes to keep his place at the top. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The idea of disappearing from everything, of leaving my life behind, was terrifying. But the thought of Nolan and my father winning again, of them bearing the truth, was even worse. You said you had proof, I said, my voice sharp. What exactly are you offering me, Marcus? He placed a set of documents in front of me, the letters on the paper crisp and clean. This is a classified memo from a late investigator. It's a report on the Talcott Group's misuse of government drone contracts. Your family was getting illegal defense grants, money that was supposed to go to real defense programs. Max, the engineer who blew the whistle on the faulty testing protocols, wasn't just silenced. He was murdered because he threatened to expose them. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The familiar dread gnawed at my insides, but I couldn't look away. They killed him? Marcus nodded, his eyes locked on mine. It wasn't an accident, Jenna. It wasn't a mistake. Max's death was part of the cover-up. They're deep in this, deeper than you could have imagined. Your father, Nolan, they've been playing the game for years. I felt the rage boiling up inside me, hot and fierce, a primal urge to fight back. But I couldn't act on it. Not yet. And this, I said, tapping the classified report, is what exactly? This is the document that ties everything together, Marcus explained. This is the kind of evidence that could bring them down. If you testify with this, you've got the leverage you need. But we both know your father won't go down quietly. I turned the report over in my hands, the weight of it sinking in. I had proof now. I had a case. I could take them to court. I could destroy everything they had built. But that came with its own set of risks, risks I wasn't ready to face on my own. But if I don't testify? I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. You disappear. You start over. No one will find you. You won't have to worry about your family coming after you. But it's not a life I'd wish on anyone. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, and I knew the choice I had to make. Running would keep me safe. Exposing them would cost me everything I had ever known. But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't fight back. I couldn't let them win, not after everything they had taken from me, from Max. The price of silence was too high. I looked at Marcus, my eyes burning with determination. I'm not running. I'm going to take them down. Marcus gave a single nod, as if he'd been expecting this answer. I figured as much, but it's not going to be easy. You'll need to prepare, and you'll need protection. These people won't hesitate to destroy you. I'm not afraid of them, I said, though the words tasted like ash in my mouth. I'm afraid of letting Max down. He sat back, studying me for a moment before speaking again. Good, because you're not alone in this anymore. I'll help you. I'll make sure the truth gets out. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the conviction that matched my own. For the first time in years, I felt like I had someone I could rely on. But as I looked at the classified documents on the table, my heart pounded. This was bigger than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about a legacy of corruption that reached deep into the heart of the government. I had the chance to expose it all. Every lie, every betrayal, every death. But I wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. I was fighting for my life. The county clerk's office was everything you'd expect from a government building. Bland, sterile, and full of people who had given up on anything resembling enthusiasm. The overhead lights buzzed softly, casting a cold glow on the rows of filing cabinets that stretched from one end of the room to the other. The air smelled like old paper and something faintly metallic, the smell of bureaucracy at its finest. I stood at the counter, my fingers tapping impatiently on the edge of the desk as I waited for the clerk to retrieve the records I had requested. My mind raced, my heart pounding with the need to find something, anything that could make the pieces fall into place. I had a folder full of documents from Marcus, but I needed more. I needed physical proof, something that tied my father's empire to the web of lies and corruption. I needed to know who had been behind the forgeries, behind the tampering with records, and who had been complicit in everything that had been hidden from me. The clerk finally appeared, a middle-aged man with a tired face, his shirt untucked, and a stack of papers in his hand. He looked at me as if he had seen my kind before. Someone who thought they could find a treasure buried in a pile of paperwork. Someone who thought the truth could be uncovered with a few clicks of a mouse and the right set of documents. "You're here for the Talcott records, right?" he asked, his voice flat. I nodded, trying to steady myself. "Yes, I need to see the property and patent transfers associated with the Talcott Group. Anything that's tied to my father's name, or my brother's for that matter." He grunted and slid the papers across the counter. "This'll take a while. You sure you want all this?" "Yeah," I replied, my voice tight. "I'm sure." The clerk gave me a long look, his expression unreadable, before turning and shuffling away to his desk. I took the pile of documents in my hands, my heart racing as I scanned through them. My eyes darted over each page, reading as quickly as I could. There were deeds, patent applications, legal documents, but everything was coming up empty. No mention of me. No mention of my contributions. No mention of anything I had worked for. I sighed, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. I was hoping for a direct link to the lies that had been covered up, but it wasn't that simple. I needed more than just these vague records. Then, as I flipped through another stack of papers, I found it. A document, dated just 2 years ago, was tucked inside a folder that looked far newer than the rest. My eyes widened as I saw the name at the top: Talcott Group, Transfer of Ownership of Intellectual Property. It was a standard document, legal in nature, but as I skimmed through the text, something caught my eye. The signature at the bottom. It was forged. I could feel my pulse quicken as I reread the line. It was signed in my mother's name. I knew she had died 5 years ago. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate act. Someone had forged her signature and illegally transferred ownership of patents and intellectual property to my father and Nolan. It wasn't just a small oversight. This was a blatant attempt to steal everything that should have been mine. I pulled the document closer, studying the signature. It was a perfect replica, far too neat and precise to have been accidental. My mother's handwriting was distinctive. I knew it better than anyone. But this was not her. This was someone else using her name to erase me entirely. My heart raced as I slid the paper back into the folder. I had what I needed. This was proof of what I had suspected all along. My family had systematically erased me from their legacy, and now they had done it in the most legally binding way possible. But there was more. I needed to know who had signed this document, who had authorized it, and that's when I noticed something else. A small stamped name at the bottom of the page. Notary Public C. Raymond Todd. I knew that name. I had heard it before many years ago, mentioned in hushed tones during family dinners, when my father spoke of his business dealings. C. Raymond Todd was an old family friend, someone my father trusted implicitly. He had handled many of the business deals over the years, and his name appeared on countless documents related to the Talcott Group. I shoved the papers into my bag, heart racing. This was bigger than I thought. If C. Raymond Todd was involved in this, that meant the web of corruption stretched farther than I could have imagined. He wasn't just a bystander, he was complicit. I needed to find him. I needed to confront him. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed leverage, and I had just the thing. I pulled out my phone and dialed Leah's number, my fingers shaking as I pressed the call button. She picked up after the first ring, her voice soft but steady. "Jenna, what's going on?" "I found something," I said, my voice low. "Something big. C. Raymond Todd was involved in the forgeries. He's the one who notarized the document transferring my mother's assets. We need to go after him." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" she asked, a note of concern in her voice. "I'm sure," I replied, the determination in my voice growing with every passing second. "I'm going to bring him down, and I'm going to bring down the Talcott Group with him." Leah was silent for a moment, then spoke again, her voice a little firmer. "All right, let's do this, but we need to be careful. If Todd is as deep in this as you think, he's not going to go down without a fight." "I know," I said, feeling the weight of what was ahead of me. "But I'm done letting them win. I'm going to expose everything." I'm going to take them all down. With that, I hung up the phone and stood up, feeling a surge of adrenaline rush through my veins. This was it, the beginning of the end. I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I was going to destroy everything they had built. The ribbon cutting event was everything my father had dreamed of, and everything I had dreaded. The Talcott Institute for Applied Tech was a glossy new building, standing proudly at the heart of the city's tech district. A massive crowd of industry elites, investors, and media had gathered for the unveiling. My father stood at the podium, bathed in the warm glow of the stage lights, a wide smile on his face as he prepared to deliver his speech. Nolan was standing at his side, his posture stiff, his expression one of barely contained pride. They looked like they were in control of everything, the future of technology in their hands. I stood off to the side, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I had been invited, but my presence was an afterthought. It wasn't supposed to be like this. This should have been my moment. I had spent years building the foundation for the very thing they were celebrating, but it wasn't my name on the podium. It wasn't my face in the glossy brochures, in the commercials, in the press releases. It was Nolan's. As the applause died down, I could feel the weight of everything pressing on me. This was it, the culmination of everything they had stolen, everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. My father stepped up to the mic, his voice booming across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are standing at the precipice of something truly groundbreaking," he began, his voice confident and authoritative. "This institute is the future of innovation, the future of applied technology, and we could not have reached this moment without the dedication and vision of my son, Nolan Talcott, whose passion and leadership have driven us to this point." The crowd clapped, their applause deafening, but I couldn't hear it. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, my mind reeling with everything I had uncovered. My mother's will, the forged documents, the hidden legacy that had been stolen from me. It was all coming to a head. I wasn't just a footnote anymore. I wasn't going to be the ghost in their story. It was time to take control. I glanced over at Leah, who was standing near the back of the room. She gave me a subtle nod, and I knew it was time. I had the evidence. I had the proof. I had the truth. With a deep breath, I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking against the polished floor. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, but I didn't care. I didn't care anymore. The lies were about to be exposed. I stepped up to the mic, my voice cutting through the air with a force I didn't even know I had. "Excuse me," I said, my voice clear, cutting through the noise. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is important. What my father and brother are standing here celebrating is built on lies, and it's time the truth came out." The room fell silent, a tense, electric silence that crackled with anticipation. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room on me, but I didn't flinch. This was my moment. "My name is Jenna Talcott," I continued, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I'm the original engineer behind the drone designs you're all here to celebrate today. But not one of you knows that because my father and brother have erased me from the story. They've stolen my work, rewritten history, and hidden the truth." A murmur ran through the crowd, whispers passing from one person to the next. I could see Nolan's face turning red, his fists clenched at his sides. He opened his mouth to say something, but I wasn't going to let him. Not now. "I have documents," I said, holding up the flash drive that had the evidence Leah and I had gathered. "I have the signed patents, the internal memos, the forgeries, and the will my mother left behind. I have everything you need to know the truth about who really built this company." I stepped back, my hands shaking slightly as I inserted the flash drive into the computer on stage. The screen flickered to life, and as the slideshow began, I watched the images of my work, the drone prototypes, the patents, the plans, flash across the screen. But the images weren't the only thing that changed. As I clicked through the slides, the faces on the screen shifted, the images of Nolan and my father cropped into the photos, replacing my own face. But the crowd wasn't focused on the images. They were focused on the words, the text that began to appear, detailing the forgeries, the alterations to the company's records, and the deaths that had been covered up. Max's name appeared on the screen, his story finally told, his death exposed for what it truly was, a murder to protect the lies. The gasps from the audience were immediate, followed by a thick, suffocating silence. I could feel the weight of every eye on me, but I stood firm, unwavering. The truth was out. It was undeniable. "Max was silenced," I said, my voice cracking slightly with the weight of what I was saying. He tried to expose the faults in the drones, but the Talcott Group didn't want that getting out, so they did what they've always done. They buried the truth. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, the disbelief written across their faces. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth was out, and nothing could take that away. My father's face twisted in fury as he stepped forward, but I held my ground. "You think you can get away with this?" he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "I think the truth will speak for itself," I replied, my voice steady now. "You can't bury it anymore. Not after everything you've done. The world will know what you've taken from me, from all of us." The crowd was still in shock, their murmurs growing louder, the realization settling in like a weight pressing down on the room. The truth was too powerful to ignore, but it wasn't just the truth that mattered anymore. It was the end of their reign. Nolan's smug grin faltered as the reality of what was happening hit him. And my father? His anger was palpable, but there was nothing he could do to stop it. The room was no longer their kingdom. It was mine. The aftermath of the gala was a blur of flashing cameras, whispered conversations, and a sea of reporters eager to capture the fallout. It didn't take long before I was plastered across headlines, my name splashed in bold letters alongside accusations that shook the foundation of the Talcott Group. My father and Nolan had tried to push back, tried to downplay the significance of the exposé, but the evidence was undeniable. The public couldn't ignore it, and I wasn't going to let them. But with the truth came a storm I hadn't anticipated. A storm of smear campaigns, social media posts, and phone calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. It started subtly at first, just a few blog posts questioning my mental health, some old video clips from my past edited to paint me as unstable. My father's lawyers were quick to spin the narrative, calling me a disgruntled employee with a personal vendetta. They made sure the message was loud and clear. Don't trust her. She's just trying to bring us down. And then came the message from my mother. "Sweetheart," the text read, "I know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle things. We are family. You need to step back and think about this. Please call your father." The message was exactly what I expected. Guilt, pleading, a subtle demand for me to give up this fight and come back to the fold. It felt like a slap in the face, the same empty manipulation I'd spent my whole life trying to escape. But this time, I wasn't going to let her guilt me into silence. I ignored her message and continued to push forward, but the pressure kept mounting. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed again. And then again. The same number, over and over. It was my father's lawyer, and it wasn't a friendly message. "Jenna, we've been instructed to advise you on how to proceed. Your actions have consequences. You're being irresponsible, and this isn't just hurting the Talcott Group, it's hurting your family. We need to meet in person." I read the message 3 times, then tossed my phone down onto the couch with a sigh. I couldn't escape it. Every moment I thought I'd gained freedom, it felt like the walls were closing in again. It wasn't just my family trying to pull me back. It was the smear campaign gaining momentum. The media had taken my father's side, painting me as a bitter, emotionally unstable woman hell-bent on ruining her family's legacy. My personal life was under attack, too. Old relationships, old work colleagues, even people from my past who had barely known me were interviewed, their voices painted as expert testimony on how I had always been difficult, unpredictable. I watched as my face was plastered across news sites, my image twisted into something unrecognizable. My phone had barely stopped ringing. It felt like the world was against me, and I couldn't escape it. My own reflection seemed like a stranger in the mirror. Who was I fighting for? What was I even fighting for? The guilt began to creep in, but I didn't have time to focus on it. I had a flash drive with irrefutable proof that I couldn't ignore anymore. It was no longer about being right. It was about the bigger picture. It was about getting back everything they had stolen from me, and about ensuring no one else suffered because of them. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Leah. "Meet me at the usual spot. I've got something for you. It's time to fight back." The urgency in her words was enough to snap me out of my spiral. I stood up, grabbing my jacket as I headed for the door. The pressure had been building up for days, and now it was time to face it head on. I couldn't keep running. I had to keep going forward, no matter what. A couple hours later, I slid into the corner booth of the quiet diner, the familiar hum of low conversation and the smell of stale coffee bringing me a small sense of calm. Leah was already waiting for me, her eyes sharp and focused as she pushed a folder across the table toward me. "What's this?" I asked, feeling the weight of the file before I even touched it. Leah didn't waste any time. She looked at me with grim determination. This is it, everything. Proof of the corruption, the misappropriation of funds, the black market deals. Everything you need to put them away for good. I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the contents quickly, each piece more damning than the last. The financials, the wire transfers, the emails, the missing funds. The money had been funneled through offshore accounts, with Nolan and my father as the prime beneficiaries, but there was more. A memo dated just a few months ago, signed off by both of them, direct orders to falsify government contracts. I looked up at Leah, my breath catching. They were laundering money, and they've been doing it right under the government's nose. Exactly, she said. And it's all tied to those drone contracts, the ones you helped design, the ones Nolan's been claiming as his own. What's worse, they've been selling those designs to international defense contractors, illegal ones, people with ties to rogue states. I felt a sick wave of disgust wash over me. My father, Nolan, they had sold out not only our country's security, but my entire future. They had sold me out without a second thought. I have everything, Leah continued, her voice low. And I've made sure it's in the right hands. But I need you to do something. I looked at her, the weight of it all starting to sink in. What? Leah's eyes darkened. I need you to testify, not just for Max, for everyone who's been silenced, for everyone they've buried. I knew the risks. Testifying against my family would be the final nail in the coffin. It would sever everything that had once tied me to them. But it was my only option now. You're sure this is the right thing to do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Once I do this, there's no going back. Leah nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. There's no turning back, Jenna, but there's no turning back for them either. It's time to end this. I sat back in the booth, the weight of the decision settling in. The truth was in my hands. All I had to do was set it free. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming. I'll do it, I said, my voice steady. I'm going to take them down. The Senate chamber was vast, lined with dark wood and high ceilings, its solemn atmosphere magnified by the sea of lawmakers sitting in front of me. The room was full, packed with politicians, press, and lawyers who had gathered to hear the testimony of one very determined woman. Me. I sat at a small table, the cool steel of the microphone a constant reminder of how deep I was in this now. My hands rested flat on the surface in front of me, the papers that would dismantle everything my father and brother had built spread neatly before me. I had prepared for this moment. I had prepared for everything. But the weight of it all still pressed on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Leah sat off to the side, her eyes focused and unwavering, watching me with that quiet, determined expression that told me she believed in me more than I believed in myself. She had been my ally through all of this. Without her, I wouldn't have had the courage to step into this battle. My father's lawyers were at the other end of the room, their expressions stern, ready to pounce. I could feel the tension in the air. They had made it clear they would try to discredit me, smear me, twist every word I said. It was all part of their plan to keep their empire intact, but I wasn't here for a fight about my character. I wasn't here to defend myself. I was here to destroy their lies. The committee chairman, a woman in her 50s with short-cropped silver hair, adjusted her glasses and looked down at the folder in front of her. The room fell silent. Miss Talcott, she began, her voice calm but firm, you have agreed to testify regarding the alleged misconduct of the Talcott Group, its leadership, and its ties to illegal drone contracts. We have reviewed your evidence and are prepared to listen to your full account. Please proceed. The spotlight was on me now. It felt like my heart was beating in my throat, but I couldn't afford to show fear. I wasn't just exposing corruption, I was exposing the truth about my family, the people I had once trusted, but there was no going back. I cleared my throat, straightened in my chair, and met the chairman's eyes. Thank you, I said, my voice firm, though it took all my effort to control the shake in my hands. For the last 10 years, I have been silent. I've been a bystander to the corruption, to the theft of ideas that were mine, to the lies that have built the Talcott Group into the corporation it is today. But no more. I paused, letting the words sink in. I could hear a murmur ripple through the room, but I didn't stop. I had to keep going. My name is Jenna Talcott. I am the original architect of the drone prototypes that the Talcott Group has made billions from. I'm the one who spent years designing, testing, perfecting what has been sold to governments around the world. but I'm not the one who has been credited for it. My name has been erased from the record. I leaned forward, looking directly at the committee members, my voice unwavering. I resigned from the company in 2015, believing that I was stepping away from a legacy I could no longer be part of. But what I didn't know was that the company had already begun rewriting history, erasing my contributions to make way for my brother Nolan's success. Nolan, who has claimed my work as his own. Nolan, who has used his position to erase anyone who stands in the way of his ascent. I glanced over at my father's lawyers. They sat rigid, their faces locked in a mask of indifference. But I knew they were waiting for an opening to attack, to twist my words, but I wasn't giving them that chance. There's more, I continued, because what I found in my own research is something that goes beyond corporate greed. This goes into the realm of illegal activity, of government contracts that were misused for personal gain. Talcott Group used its influence to secure defense contracts that were not just unethical, they were illegal. And when someone tried to blow the whistle, Max, one of the engineers who worked with me, they silenced him. I could hear the collective gasp around the room. The name Max was known to a few people in the room, but now, with the details spilling out, I could see their eyes widen as they absorbed the scope of what I was saying. Max was killed because he tried to expose what was happening. His death wasn't an accident. It was a consequence of trying to stop the corruption, of trying to do what was right. And instead of seeking justice, my father and brother swept it under the rug. I glanced at my father's lawyers again. The look on their faces was unreadable, but I could see the tiniest flicker of fear in their eyes. They knew this wasn't just a family feud anymore. This was a full-blown scandal. I have proof, I said, pulling the flash drive from my pocket and placing it on the table in front of me. Everything I'm saying is backed up by documents, emails, memos, the signatures of my father, Nolan, and C. Raymond Todd, the notary who falsified company records for them. This flash drive contains everything you need to know. I nodded toward the chairman, who leaned forward slightly, signaling for someone to collect the drive. She nodded at me once before turning to the other members of the committee. What you are saying is serious, Miss Talcott, the chairman said slowly, her gaze never leaving me. And these accusations, these documents, if they are verified, would suggest an extensive web of corruption that goes beyond corporate misconduct. This could lead to criminal charges. Exactly, I said, my eyes burning with the weight of it all. But it's not just about bringing down my family. This is about justice. This is about exposing an empire built on lies and stopping it from doing further damage. If I can bring them down, if I can make them pay for what they've done, maybe I can finally get back what's mine. But more importantly, I can make sure no one else gets silenced the way Max did. The chairman looked down at the drive, then back at me. Thank you for your testimony, Miss Talcott. We will review the evidence you have provided, and we will follow up with the appropriate legal actions. I can't promise you immediate results, but you've made a compelling case. The truth has a way of finding its way to the surface. I nodded, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. This was the turning point, the moment when everything had to come out. It didn't matter what happened next. This was bigger than me, bigger than my family. This was about making sure no one else would be crushed under the weight of their greed and lies. The chairman stood up, signaling the end of the hearing, but I didn't move. I let the weight of the moment sink in. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I wasn't just fighting for my legacy anymore. I was fighting for the truth. And no matter what, I wasn't going to stop until it came to light. As the room began to empty, I caught a glimpse of Nolan in the back. He looked furious, his face a mask of pure rage. But I didn't care anymore. The game was over. The truth had been set free. The small innovation center was quieter than I had expected. The air was warm, filled with the gentle hum of computers and the soft murmur of voices as students, veterans, and young engineers filled the space. It was smaller than the massive Talcott Institute, but it felt real. It felt like something that was mine, built from the ground up, not stolen or manipulated, but created by hands that understood the weight of what it meant to make something out of nothing. Max would have loved this place. I stood at the front of the room, my heart pounding with a quiet excitement. Behind me, a banner hung from the ceiling. The Max Thompson Innovation Center for Ethical Engineering and Whistleblower Support. The space was simple. Clean white walls adorned with blueprints, models, and prototypes that told the stories of ideas birthed by dreamers, not executives. There was a corner for meetings, a small stage for presentations, and a series of workstations that had once been filled with ideas that had long since been buried. The quiet crowd was a mix of students, engineers, and veterans who had come to the center for the same reason I had, to reclaim what had been taken from them, to make sure that no one else had to watch their work be stolen, their names erased. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the room press on me in a way I hadn't felt in years. This was it. This was what my mother had wanted me to build. Something that could carry forward her legacy, my legacy, and Max's, in a way that couldn't be erased by corporate greed. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady but my chest tight with emotion. When I first started in this industry, I believed it was about the work, the ideas we create, the people we inspire, the future we build, but I quickly learned that it's not always that simple. The world doesn't always care about innovation. Sometimes it just cares about who's in power, who has the money to make the rules. And when that happens, the truth gets buried. I paused for a moment, looking out at the crowd. They were all here for a reason. Some had been silenced, some had been stolen from, but all of them understood that fight for what was right. I'm standing here today because I refuse to be erased, I continued, my voice growing stronger. I refuse to let the lies win. Max Thompson, who worked alongside me for years, refused to let the truth be buried. He paid the ultimate price for it, and I owe him this. This center, this space for people to come together, to build ideas and protect the truth. A young woman in the front row raised her hand, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What kind of work do you want us to do here?" she asked, her voice bright with hope. I smiled softly, feeling the warmth of the moment. "I want you to innovate. I want you to think outside the box, to build things that will change the world. But I also want you to do it ethically. I want you to understand that integrity matters just as much as the product you build. If you ever find yourself in a position where the truth is being buried, where what you're doing is being used for profit at the expense of others, then this space is for you. We'll protect you. We'll make sure you're not alone." The young woman smiled and nodded, her eyes filled with hope. "And what about you?" A veteran sitting near the back of the room asked, his voice rough but steady. "What's next for you? Where do you go from here?" I didn't have to think about it. I knew what I had to do. "I'll keep teaching," I said firmly. "I'll keep making sure that the next generation understands that their work matters. But I'm not done fighting for what's mine, what's been taken from me, what's been taken from all of us." There was a murmur of agreement from the crowd, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly among allies, among people who understood the weight of this fight, people who knew what it meant to lose everything, and yet still keep going. "Before we go," I said, stepping down from the small stage and walking to the back of the room, "there's one more thing I want to share." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the letter from my mother. The will that had set everything in motion. I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need to prove to anyone that I had been right, but I wanted them to understand that this center wasn't just a space for innovation. It was a space for justice. I unfolded the letter and held it up for everyone to see. The room fell silent. "This," I said, "was my mother's final wish. She left everything to me, to the legacy I've been fighting for. And I'm finally here, standing in her place, standing in the place of those who fought with me. This space, this fight, is for all of us." The crowd stood, applauding, and in that moment, I knew that I had done something more than just reclaim my legacy. I had built something that couldn't be erased, no matter how hard they tried. A boy approached me after the applause died down. He was no older than 17, with a shy smile and a notepad in his hands. He hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Can I learn from you?" I smiled, my heart swelling with a quiet pride. "You already are," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder. "And that's how we change the world." The weight of everything I had been through lifted in that moment, replaced by something new, something stronger. It wasn't just about taking back what was mine anymore. It was about making sure that no one else would ever be silenced again. The legacy, my legacy, had been reclaimed.